Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. The war against ISIS continues. To discuss it from the Kurdish perspective, we have two gentlemen, Dr. Anwar Anaid and Dr. Henri Barkey. Let me go to you first, Dr. Barkey. Can you explain to us what's going on in the fight for Mosul and in northern Iraq today?
Well, the fight for Mosul has not started yet. Mosul is the second most important city in Iraq, and getting Mosul back is critical for both Iraq and for the Kurds. But most importantly, if you want Iraq to become one again, if you want Iraq to be united again, Mosul has to be taken. Except that it's a very, very difficult task, and nobody is ready to do it yet. The Iraqi armed forces are not ready. The Kurdish forces are probably better ready than the Iraqi forces, but still not insufficient. So it will take some time, but it is critical that that planning has to start for this.
You know, Dr. Anaid, you're in Iraq right now, in Erbil, in the capital of Kurdistan,
yes.
And so you're there on the front lines. When you look at the fight for Mosul, which the administration has pointed out it intends to do in just a few months' time to retake Mosul, how likely is it to succeed, and what has to happen for it to succeed?
Well, it all depends how much efforts they're going to put into warfare here. But let me briefly explain the situation from a Kurdish perspective. What's happened here, that Kurdistan region is under, despite the high moral, Peshmerga's moral, because they're fighting a just war, you know, they're defending their land, their honor. But at the same time, the KRG is facing some serious challenges from very different kind. They have budgetary issues with the central government. They have not been paid for the last year or so. That's one. The other thing is that they are taking care of almost 1.5 and 2 million refugees. Remembering that we are talking about a population of 5 million people in Kurdistan region, and also the huge and monumental task of taking care of 1,050 kilometers of frontline war with the ISIS. So I think as far as the liberation of Mosul is concerned, the Kurdistan region do understand their responsibility. But at the same time, they need much more support from the international community to be fully prepared to help. Now, they are also worried about the Kurdistan region is worried about not being perceived as the whole fighting or liberation of Mosul being perceived as an ethnic conflict between Kurds and the Arabs. But for better, you know, if we are to be on a better ground for liberation of Mosul, there's a lot of support needs to be, you know, given to KRG.
You know, Dr. Barkey, is the United States doing enough? We've talked about training the Iraqi army. We've talked about arming the Kurds. But if what you're saying is that we're not prepared to fight this war yet, what can the United States do that it's not now doing?
Well, look, the United States cannot fight this war for the Iraqis, the Syrians, for anybody. I mean, this is something that the Iraqis and the Syrians will have to engage. I think what the administration has decided to do is to train, get those forces ready, but also get a coalition to support with massive airstrikes, drone operations, special forces, etc. And I think eventually this will be sufficient. But what's missing at the moment is sufficient Iraqi divisions to engage the ISIS. Now, look what's happening in Syria. In Syria, you have essentially a group of insurgent Kurds who have actually done very, very well against ISIS, but they have done it with American air support. And there, I think the administration took a very gutsy decision, and one has to give them credit, because they decided to support a Kurdish group that America's ally Turkey did not want us to support. And it paid off, and it paid off very, very substantially. So I think the model will work, but you need local partners to work with you. and that's what the administration is trying to get going.
Dr. Anaid, we've seen the atrocities. We've seen the murders, the beheadings of Christians, of religious minorities, of Kurds, of Coptic Christians. To what extent do you think ISIS overreaches? That there's such a horror of what they're doing that the moderate Sunnis in the region will say, enough, we're not going to rally to your side, and that it somehow collapses from within of its own weight. Dr. Anaid, what do you think?
From a Kurdish perspective, ISIS is nothing but an organization of the religious criminals. That has been the Kurdish position from the very beginning. If you're talking from Sunni Arabs' perspective, of course, probably there are many of them who disagree, but we should not forget they do have a popular basis among the Sunni Arabs, particularly in Mosul region. So we should not underestimate their capabilities and their power. But if I mention, the only effective force now on the ground that is fighting ISIS is Kurdish Peshmerga. But unfortunately, there is a resentment and there's a sense of frustration among the Kurdish official and Peshmerga that the credit and the weapons are not given where is it due, which is Peshmerga. We are doing most of the fighting. We are the people who have actually proved on the ground that we can put up an effective fight against ISIS, but we do not see the level of the international recognition and the level of the actually support on the ground in terms of heavy weapons for the Kurdistan.
Dr. Barkey, let me ask you, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. Anaid, as well. Dr. Barkey, do you think that the coalition forces can retake Mosul?
Yes, but it will take a long time because it's not just Mosul that you need to take. It's also there are large chunks of territory around Mosul between the headquarters of ISIS in Raqqa in Syria and Mosul. So you need to be able to cut off all the supply lines to Mosul. You need to start starving out in terms of ammunition and equipment ISIS. But it can be done. But let's be honest, it's going to be very bloody because Mosul is a very large city and ISIS is probably preparing itself for this ground assault by creating booby traps, by creating tunnels so that they can move their people around and essentially engage in a guerrilla war against Iraqi and Kurdish forces that will be coming. So we should not underestimate how violent and bloody this is going to be. But it definitely can be done. ISIS is not that powerful. It seems powerful because the forces against it were unprepared, and especially the Iraqi army proved to be essentially a paper army until now. But we did see in Syria, with the Syrian Kurds taking on ISIS with American air support, that they could be very successful. And the Syrian Kurds are not well equipped. They're well trained, but they're not well equipped. So that gives me...
Okay, well, thank you both very much for... Yeah. I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it off here. Thank you both very much, Dr. Barkey and Dr. Anaid. That's it for DEF CON 3. If you want to know more about the battle for Mosul, go to foxnews.com.